welcome to Fat Girl Speaks. Today is Friday, February 21st. I'm Amy Beth, also known as the Fat Squirrel on Ravelry and Blue Sky. Thanks for coming over for these blue skies, y'all. Snowy, the light's reflecting off of it, the sky's clear. It's pretty dang cold, but that's okay because it's February. So I just want to send out big thank yous to y'all, but specifically to the patrons of the podcast. If you'd like to find out more about how you can support the podcast, that can be found at patreon.com/thefatsquirrel. But also for folks who are supporting the business, fatsquirrelfibers.com, who like, subscribe, all those things. But also thank you for being patient with Gus, as he is slightly stressed out about a bird, because we definitely don't have those usually. But, okay, sorry. Back into my thank yous. Okay. Thank you. Thank you for being supportive of the people you love and care about. Thank you for being empathetic. Thank you for being whimsical. Thank you for being playful. Thank you for being creative and interesting and just excited about things you don't know and to learn more about things you do know. Thank you for questioning your confirmation bias in this far too fast news cycle. Thank you for that. Thank you for taking time away from the interwebs to nurture yourself and the people that you care about or the animals you care about. So thank you for all of those things. If you don't feel like somebody's seeing you, they are. Oh, in case I forget to tell you, I am wearing a handmade shirt. This is the Cameron shirt from Helen's Closet. It's just sort of a traditional button-up shirt. And it is made with quilter's cotton because I actually love to sew with quilter's cotton. Garments, that is. Also quilts and other things. But lots of times people will tell you, like if you're garment sewing, if you're starting out garment sewing, there's lots of like, don't use quilter's cotton. And yes, that definitely can be a truth. Like if you're making a gathered skirt that has like 10 times the width of your body, you know what I mean? Like if you're doing quilter's cotton, you're probably going to have like a skirt that sits out like this, doesn't like hang down like this. Like, you know, there's definitely things you would not want to use quilter's cotton for, right? But I actually really love everything I think that I've ever made with quilter's cotton in terms of like shirts. And have I made any pants that I wear outside the house out of quilter's cotton? I guess I haven't, but I wouldn't hesitate to. It's a durable fabric. Unfortunately, it's not cheap, but it is durable. Like I know what I'm going to get. Unlike when I'm trying to order knits, when I never know what I'm going to get. Like even the last time I ordered interlock that was made by Birch, because the interlock I got 5 years ago, I really loved. This interlock is not the same. And I'm disappointed. Do you know what I mean? Like, quilter's cotton's pretty darn consistent. So you know what you're going to get, especially if you're going with like the same manufacturer, like Art Gallery or Moda or whatever. So it's very predictable and there's lots of fun colors and prints and all that good stuff too. So there's definitely downfalls in terms of like it's narrower width than a lot of garment sewing fabrics, but you know, it is what it is. But so yeah, so I really enjoy it like for this sort of like more structured-ish. I don't know, this really isn't structured because I feel like that means like princess scenes or something. But anyways, for like this thing that's not flowy and whooshy, I love it because, for example, I actually really don't love button-up shirts that are made with like poplin, or there are fabrics that are just cold Like they're so smooth that when you put them on, they're cold. And for a shirt that I'm going to wear like in the fall and the winter, I don't love that. At the same time, I don't necessarily want a flannel because I don't want like pilling and well, not all flannel pills, but you know what I mean. Like bulky, more bulky. I don't want to have strings attached to it at all times because there's always string in my life. So this is like a very nice medium. When you put it on, the texture feels warm. The texture sounds nice. I don't know. It's durable. I feel like wovens don't show grease stains like knits. Am I alone in this thought? Do you have an opinion? I don't know. But that's how I feel. Maybe it's because the wovens I get are often prints and so therefore it just it's not as visible. But I also just don't think they show. I love knits. I love them. But it feels like they do show the grease stains much worse, which is one of my big problems with the garments. I know, I should wear an apron when I'm cooking especially, but do I? No. No, I do not. What are you gonna do? So anyway, so that's a lot of information about my shirt that I wasn't necessarily planning on telling you, but there you have it. And so in these times, I don't have shenanigans. I guess the shenanigans are of the mind. And so I'm going to talk about a thing that I am challenged by this week, like a thought that I'm challenged by this week, and then something that is joyous that I've been thinking about this week. So the first thing I'll talk about is the thing that I have been frustrated, challenged, overwhelmed, disheartened, all of those things. So I'll talk about that now. So the first thing is like, what is different about like our misinformation cycle, right? Like there's always been misinformation, right? Always. There's also been lots of unintentionally incorrect information, right? Like there's a whole podcast called You're Wrong About, which is, well, actually I shouldn't say that. I stopped listening when Michael Hobbs left, but the episodes I did listen to were very interesting because most of them were about news stories that I sort of grew up with, like Tanya Harding and O.J. Simpson and satanic panic stuff, like. And the whole the McDonald's the coffee lawsuit, you get an hour episode, multiple episodes about a thing that the media, with all, I'm sure, you know, with fairly good intention, just got the story wrong. But it was the first thing we heard about it and heard about the topic or the ongoing story. And it just wasn't quite right yet, or it was very skeletal and we needed more information to like flesh out what was actually going on, to like, again, look for that nuance, right? And so like the story actually, when we're looking back on it 10, 20, 30 years later, has a whole different vibe, right? Like, again, it's called You're Wrong About because you'll be surprised about how many things that you have distinct memories of happening and you remember the news cycle and you're remembering it correctly, but the news just got it wrong. And I'm sure that there was, I don't know, but I imagine there was some sort of like, further information on this case is bloody blah, but it was like buried somewhere deep in the news or it was in the paper, but not. Anyway, so like that's always been a thing, right? And I'm sure it's been wildly frustrating to people who have been a part of that news cycle, whose story was put out there in an incorrect way. But is it because so much information can just be flippantly published? Like in terms of like, you know, we have top level government people like putting out tweaks or putting out like social media posts, and they're just like, it feels like they're very flippant, reactionary. Anyway, so we can scream fire we're allowed to scream fire in the movie theater, it feels like, right? Like, do you remember that example when you were a kid, when you were learning about freedom to speech? It's like, yeah, you have freedom to speech, but you can't yell fire in a crowded movie theater. And it feels like, well, when is the line for that in terms of getting things really wrong and causing a sort of like mental emotional stampede that's a lot more people than just the people that can be held in the movie theater. And like, when do we decide that that is not an appropriate way to communicate with people, and that if we do get things wrong, and I don't mean just one person, I mean if any of us get something wrong, right? Like, if any of us get something wrong, if the fact check comes back and it's like, oh no, nay, that was incorrect. Why is it that we do not have to say that incorrect thing, or that redaction of the incorrect thing, as loudly as we had to say it in the first place, right? Like, I feel like if I stand in front of an audience of 4,000 people and I tell them that the sky is green, maybe I really believe the sky is green, but then like 3 weeks later I find out the sky is in fact blue. Like, I should have to say the sky is blue just as loud. And I shouldn't have to just be like to my friend, like, oh yeah, I was wrong about that. The sky really is blue. That should not be an equivalent statement. Like, or we should require some sort of equivalency. I don't know. That's just one of the things because that's one of the scariest things, right? I feel like that's one of the, or at least for me, there's so many scary things. But one of the like really, one of the things that just feels so shifting sand, unstable, what do we do about this, is this information silo, to use like a stupid business term, but it's, it's useful. Like, how do we work with this, And it just feels like it's one thing when it's, we're getting wrong information about like what Macy's is doing in their management style. I don't know why we would learn about that in the news, but whatever. Oh, I would, because now we got DEI stuff everywhere. But like, it's one thing when it's like that, and it affects like a very like contained number of human beings, and it's not good. But they can get the information distributed to them because like this information is relevant to them, and they will get that information. But when we're served something terribly incorrect and just encouraged almost, or at least it's accepted to just to pin it on our lapel and then go out in the world without questioning it or its relevancy, or I mean, I guess we are questioning it. Like, again, we're getting into like confirmation bias stuff. But anyway, like, it feels very, it feels like that. So anyway, I would love to know if you have read anything about that interesting lately, or if you can point me to a resource that you found to be valuable, or maybe just like a thought exercise that you found valuable around that topic. I mean, it's not a new problem, but it is definitely a new scope, right? Like it's a new volume problem. So yeah. And so in a thing that I have I don't think I have ever done on the podcast, is that I really want to share with you an Instagram post, and I probably have done this, but this is an Instagram post in which, let me just get the information for you. This is an Instagram post in which ALI, or I guess she's TikTok maybe. I don't know. You can never tell where things are getting posted from anymore. That's also a problem. Anyway, her username is ALIMILNE. And essentially what she says is that she asked folks on TikTok, what are some things you do to be more whimsical? I love knowing about cute little habits. And here are some of my favorite responses. I wear matching pajamas every time I change my sheets so I can have what I call fancy sleep. Do you want fancy sleep, Gus? Gus is very fancy. He always has fancy sleep. But isn't that the cutest? Also, if you're having a lady get together, I feel like that is a good recommendation. Or a people get together, a sleepover of sorts. Is that we're all gonna have fancy sleep. Then another person posted that they hold office hours every Tuesday at a local coffee shop. And by that, she means I sit on the couch and order drinks for 4 to 5 hours while various friends and acquaintances visit me to yap about books and gossip. She's essentially holding court. But I love that. I'm gonna have office hours, and you wouldn't have to do it every week. You could just be like, oh, I'll let it be known that I will have office hours on Fridays from, okay, nobody can do it on Fridays. Office hours on Sundays from 2 to 4 at X coffee shop. And then like have your friends take other hour slot or other time slots throughout the month. You do all your visiting. I love it. If nobody shows up, you just have an excuse to drink delicious drinks and have a little time to ponder. Love it. This one is so good. If I want to have negative thoughts about myself, I have to think them in a Cockney accent. I mean, pick an accent of your choice. But if I want to have negative thoughts about myself, I have to have them in a Cockney or accent of your choice accent. Right? Don't make that voice your own. Make it somebody else's. You wouldn't let other people talk to you like that. Or at least I hope you don't. I mean, also it's just festive and funny. But... But I think there actually might be something to it, like psychologically, to like not have that voice be your own, right? To have it to be an other, because it is. It's a thought. It's not you. It's something that comes into your mind and you can let it go. But boy, it's hard to sometimes. I speak from understanding. Okay. I love this one. I say, "Milady," whenever I walk by a mirror. As a fat person, I'm a huge proponent of having lots of mirrors in your house. I don't have lots of mirrors in my house because I don't have a lot of wall space, but I do have one full-length mirror in my bedroom, and it's like a big full-length mirror. Well, I mean, it's big. It's bigger than I am wide. And I do really think deeply that it is helpful to be exposed to yourself. Now, this is, I think, much like, I guess I'm going to say this, but this is hyperbolic. So just take whatever this is down a couple notches. But I don't know how else to talk about it. But it's sort of like trauma exposure therapy, right? Like, so I think if you're in a place where you're ready to be exposed and to like absorb and heal and move through, that it's a very useful tool. But I'm sure that it also could be, it could hold further trauma or unease that you're not ready for if you're not ready for it. So, you know, talk to your therapist. But I do think that it has helped me quite a bit. And in fact, even this podcast has helped me quite a bit to like look at myself a lot. Now, granted, I get to choose the angle. I get to choose how I show up. So there's lots of like comfort around it, but it still helps to like just to see yourself. Okay, sorry, that was an aside, which I had not planned on. I like this one. I teach the dog how to do things either to make them more interesting for me, let me show you how to start a load of laundry, or just to make him feel included. Do you remember how to make coffee, or should I walk you through it again? I know it's hard to remember since you can't practice without thumbs. I tell my dishes, it's bath time! Whenever I drop or mess something up when I'm alone, I bow and say, end scene. instead of getting frustrated. I've done this for so long that I literally no longer get annoyed by my own mistakes, and laughing is my first instinct anytime anything goes wrong. I really love this one. I like drinking water at night out of small wooden bowls. It makes me feel like I'm being nursed back to health by spirits. I feel like this really goes into like maybe I should just cosplay as a Hobbit theme. Right. I tell my hamster not to answer the door for anyone before I leave. I wash dishes by candlelight, listening to medieval tavern music, and pretend I'm a tavern wench. Can you hold this, please? When I set my purse on an inanimate object. It works for anything. When you put your soda on an inanimate... Oh, could you hold this, please? I enjoy it. And then the last one that I will read you, there's more in here, but the last one I will read you is, when I leave the house, I always tell my dog no parties while I'm gone, and then laugh so he knows he is 100% allowed to throw parties if he wants. So yay, whimsy. I would love to know your whimsical habits. Let's share. Okay, and then in shameless self-promotion, I don't have an update this week. I will have an update on March 1st. March 1st, 9 p.m. Eastern, fastworldfibers.com. It'll be a pre-order update, and I'm pretty excited about it, but I'll show those to you next time. And then in knitting, I have a couple of finished objects. So the first thing I have to show you is the 2x2 hat by Anne G. And it's just the initial G. It's a free one size hat, and it's a free pattern. It's one size, an adult size, and it requires about 200 yards of worsted. So here's mine, right? And what I did is I used I used 2 skeins of another Crafty Girl and her sport weight. They are skeins I had left over from another project. They're actually the collaboration we did about this time last year. So there's a green skein and a brown skein. I held them double, so that gave me something probably slightly meatier than a regular worsted weight, but it was about right. So here's mine. The thing that I did differently is because I was holding 2 sport weights double. So because my yarn was a little chunkier than the suggested yarn weight, I did have to modify the size slightly. So the pattern is just a one size, 112 stitches for your cast on. And so if you have that situation where you just have one size available in the pattern, by the way, this is a tip for newer knitters or people who just are not as experienced with modifying. This is like a fairly easy toe dip into the process. What you want to do for a hat is you need to pay attention to 2 things. You need to pay attention to your pattern repeat. So in this case, it's 2x2 rib. So my pattern repeat is 4 stitches. And the other thing you want to pay attention to is the crown decreases, right? So there's several different ways that you can there's multiple different ways you can decrease for a crown. But one of the common ones is to do like the 4-point decreases, right? Where you get like, basically if the pattern is telling you to put stitch markers in to mark your decreases, you'll have 4 stitch markers, your beginning of round and your 3 more. And so that means that you should take out, if you're gonna make it smaller, you should take out multiples of your stitch count, of your pattern repeat, times however many units there are in the decrease. So in this case, I had 4 stitches in my pattern repeat and 4 repeats. So I need to take out 16 stitches to make the pattern one size smaller, okay? Or one notch smaller. And then just do the opposite if it's a little bit too small. So you need to add 16 stitches, you add that to your 112. And then the most common other decrease pattern is to do this decreases evenly spaced. So just look at your pattern and see like how many total stitch markers you're going to need. If you need 8 stitch markers, well then you're going to have 8 places, 8 sections you're decreasing in. So make sure you're taking out 8 times whatever your pattern repeat is. So if it's just stockinette, just take out multiples of 8. But if it's 2x2 rib, then take out multiples of 32. So yeah, so that was just a little aside. Sometimes I forget to like think about things in a different place skill-wise than I am. So I apologize that is something I fall into. It's hard when we have like a broad audience, right? Like we're not in a class where we have a relatively homogenous skill level relatively. So we're just kind of like, it's like to the bigger audience. So yeah. But anyway, so that is the 2x2 hat by Angie. Oh, I guess I could put it on. I have a headband on, so it's going to be... So this one isn't for me, but yeah, it's totally cute. It was very enjoyable. Like lots of times I'll be like, oh, 2x2 rib, but I don't know. Again, I'm in a place right now where I'm actually enjoying like having a very clear, just work on this. Sizing isn't a problem. Fit isn't a problem. Pattern repeats are not a problem, or, you know, stitch repeats are not a problem. I just feel very comforting right now. And so then in whimsical knitting, I made a gift for my mom a few weeks ago for her birthday. And I recorded this before I sent it off to her because I didn't want, she does occasionally watch the podcast, so I didn't want to spoil the surprise. So I'll put that in here. So here is my Nana the Lady Duck. She is a pattern by Cynthia Valet. And it's N-A-N-N-A. Is she not so cute? So in the original pattern, her jumper or her dress is striped with all different colors. I think there's like 7 colors or 8 colors. But I just went ahead and did the 2 because it's for somebody. Okay, it's for my mom, and I thought she would appreciate the blue and the kind of gray-y taupey color. But like, look how cute she turned out. Right? So thank you for being patient with my like wet hair and stuff. I have to go to the mailbox quickly. And I have an appointment before that. But okay, also, do you see your little tail feathers? Right? Okay, so I'm gonna show you her body, but just FYI, I ran out of the main color yarn and I knew that it was awfully close when I started. So she has a stripe of a similar color yarn, but you can totally tell it. But I felt comfortable with it because her little jumper covers it. But can we just discuss what is up with the shape of her bottom? Here, I'll do it this way so you can light. Right. How cute is her rump? I mean, so cute. So anyway, I'm very pleased with how she turned out. I love her little wings. Aren't they just the cutest? She's all in the round. The only seam she has is on her crotch. I stuffed her with wool and then some little like river gravel, so some smooth little rocks. Just she sits pretty good, like the way she's kind of like her bottom is shaped like you're turning a heel, so it is pretty flat. And then before I like, because you could like maybe stuff her slightly less and she would definitely sit evenly, but I just wanted to put some weight in her because I just really like the way they feel when they're a little bit weighted. And then again, it's just easier, like especially if her little feet are up or if she is hanging off of a shelf or something, she's got a little bit more balance to keep her going. The pattern looked like they had her little paddlers. What are those called, guys? Y'all, her webbed feet, I can't maybe that is all they're called. I don't know. Her paddlers were stuffed a little bit more, but I liked them a little bit less stuffed so they still sort of look flatter, but you do still get the heel turn on them. So isn't she cute? I used Ralma Fingarn for her body, and then like just leftovers of Jameson and another Ralma for her dress. And then her little feet are a super wash. Oh, they're they're hazel knits in the like shag carpet colorway or something, because it's leftovers from a pair of socks. And so they are not woolen spun, they're worsted spun, but I thought that would work because these are like slicker things on our little feathery body. How cute. She's so sweet. Yay, knitting. Okay, so in reading, I just finished doing the recording for reading. There's a lot. I had a bunch of library holds that came available this week. You know how that is, right? Like you've got like 10 book. Okay, that's another point of contention I have. I can only have 10 library holds. What is this world? But anyway, so you have like 10 library holds, and it seems like they're going to be spaced out. Not that it would have changed how I would have, taken them or whatever. But like, it seems like they're relatively spaced out. Like when you look at it, you're like, oh, that one's doing 2 weeks. Or that one's about 2 weeks wait, and that one's about 4 weeks wait. Oh, that's maybe 2 weeks to wait too. But inevitably, like 5 books that I've been waiting on, not just for like a few weeks, because if it's just a few weeks, I'll be like, okay, well, I can wait another few weeks for this. But it'll be like 5 books I've been waiting for like months, and they just all slam in at the same time. So then I have to just like, well, I don't have to, but I want to just listen to them all. So there's a lot in the book section, which might explain why there was slightly less in the knitting section. I mean, I did show you a whole like little stuffy, but I didn't knit that this week. I did it last week. So yeah. So anyway, so everything is timestamped. So if you're like, no, thank you, just skip ahead to the next one. I'll do fiction first and then nonfiction second. So I finished this book. It's by Olga Ravn, R-A-V-N, and it's called The Employees. And the subtitle is A Workplace Novel of the 22nd Century. So here's the description. The crew of the 6,000 ship consists of those who were born and those who were made, those who will die and those who will not. When the ship takes on a number of strange objects from the planet New Discovery, the crew is perplexed to find itself becoming deeply attached to them, and human and humanoid employees alike start aching for the same things: warmth and intimacy, loved ones who have passed, shopping and child-rearing, our shared faraway Earth which now only persists in memory. Gradually, the crew members come to see their work in a new light, and each employee is compelled to ask themselves whether they can carry on as before and what it means to be truly living. Structured as a series of witness statements compiled by a workplace commission, Ravn's crackling prose is as chilling as it is moving, as exhilarating as it is foreboding. Racked by all kinds of longing, the employees probes into what it means to be human, while delivering an overdue critique of a life governed by the logic of productivity. So I have started using the Storygraph app to try to track my reading. And one of the things they do that is really interesting. So one of the only negatives about the app is that it doesn't have quite as many reviews as, for example, Goodreads. But one of the things they do really like, that I really like, is they give like a mood synopsis, or they give a mood section where they have several keywords, and then they rank like the percentage of folks who identify the book with that mood. For example, this one, moods are mysterious, 73% of folks, reflective, 61% of folks, dark, 58% of folks. So it's, again, sometimes it's hard to tell, like, oh, what am I in the mood for? And I just thought this was a really clever way to give you that, again, just a quick textural content or context for like maybe what the plot of the book is about. The other thing they do is they have several categories. For example, this one has pace, and it tells you how many people thought it was fast paced, how many thought it was medium, slow. Plot or character driven, strong character development, lovable characters, diverse characters, flaws, and characters are the main focus. So I just think it's a really interesting approach to something a little bit more than a X-star rating. You know what I mean? But yet it's still very clear and fast, and it doesn't risk getting into reviews of the book that might have spoilers or, are clearly shaped by individual humans, and you don't know those humans, right? So I really enjoyed this. It's fairly short. It is, let's see, about 125 pages, and there's not a full page of text on many of them because, again, they are in statements. So you get, I don't think any of them are longer than 2 pages. And you're not told who the statement is by. There's not like a clear cast of characters. I guess that's what I'm saying. You have like groups of characters. But it's really interesting. So this was inspired by an art installation called Consumed Future Spewed Up as Present. And it definitely feels like a book inspired by an art installation. It's experimental. It's, again, unexpected in places. Like, again, because you have these different voices and you're not sure who those voices are from, you get like really fun or really interesting, like jarring differences between different voices. It's also not, I mean, it's like relatively chronological, but not, again, you're not like having a chronological narrative that everyone on this ship is sharing, that they're like commenting on. Like everybody is, anyway, very interesting. I enjoyed it. It makes you think a lot about, again, especially in these times, it makes you think a lot about the dehumanization of labor. And again, as we just like blindly lay off massive quantities of people without having an understanding of what they do or what is important or valid about them as human beings, feels especially timely, unfortunately. So yeah, that is The Employees by Ogle Ravin. And so the rest of the books I will talk about in the fiction section are books that I checked out from my local library via the Libby app, and I listened to them all via an audiobook format. So the next book I'm going to talk about is Penitence, which is a book by Kristen Koval, Koval, and that is Kristen with a K. And here is the description. For fans of Anne Patchett, I always want to say Pratchett. For fans of Anne Patchett and Celeste Ng, Penitence is a poignant exploration of love and forgiveness. It's a suspenseful, addictive thriller filled with literary insight that compels listeners to consider whether the worst thing we've ever done is all that defines us. Okay, so that's... I'll get into the description more. I would not say it's a suspenseful thriller. I think that is... I would not... If I were recommending to somebody, I would never call it a suspenseful thriller. No. Like if it were a movie, it would be a drama. There is some level of suspense in it, but like there is in any story that is unfolding. But I would, no, I would not call it a thriller. That is not in any way a detriment. I just don't want to like falsely advertise what this book is. So here is the description. When a shocking murder occurs in the home of Angie and David Sheehan, their lives are shattered. Desperate to defend their family, they turn to small-town lawyer Martine Dumont for help. But Martine isn't just legal counsel. She's also the mother of Angie's first love, Julian, a now successful New York City criminal defense attorney. As Julian and Angie confront their shared past and long-buried guilt from a tragic accident years ago, they must navigate their own culpability and the unresolved feelings between them. Spanning decades from ski slopes of rural Colorado to the streets of pre-9/11 New York City and back again, Kristen Koval's debut novel, Penitence, is an examination of the complexities of familial loyalty, the journey of redemption, and the profound experiences of true forgiveness. So the little mood board is 86% emotional. 86% of people said it was emotional. It would be weird if people were like, this book is 86% emotional. 74% gave sad, 52% reflective, 48% dark. That's interesting. I didn't think it was. Okay, 36%, I'm in the 52% apparently. 36% said it was challenging. Okay, so et cetera. It's definitely character driven. And I really enjoyed it. There were So I think the narrator was very good. That's one thing that I enjoyed. And I think that I also enjoyed that it was an audiobook version, because I could see how there were several people who commented that they felt like it was too slow. Like not just a slow burn, but like literally like a little bit too boggy. And particular people seem to complain about the chapters being quite long. That's not something I noticed at all. But that might have been because, again, of the audiobook version. And I tend to listen to my audiobooks on like 1.5 or 1 3/4 speed. So it was long. It's a long book. But I didn't feel like it was, yeah, I wasn't like, oh, the last third, bleh. You know what I mean? Like it felt consistently paced in terms of, it felt consistently paced. And I didn't feel like I was like, oh, please stop saying the same thing over and over again. So I didn't find it, I liked the pace of it. So, I will say it was maybe not a book I would have liked when I was younger, because it feels like, there's not a ton of resolution in the book, but I don't think the book is about resolution, right? It's about grief, and it's about forgiveness, and it's about family relationships. It's about declining health. It's about, again, all of these things and more. So it doesn't feel like it's, I don't think the point of the book is necessarily resolutions or answers, maybe, or like tying things up. Maybe that's what I should say. It doesn't feel like that's necessarily the point of the book, but I think I could see how my younger self might have been like, but when I got done with the book. But it didn't feel unsettling to me to not get concrete answers about things, because sometimes that feels, sometimes it doesn't feel authentic anymore, right? Like the older I get, the more I'm like, are there any answers? Do you know what I mean? Like they do feel nice, but sometimes I feel like I just want to feel nice, not necessarily really have resolution. But so, yeah. So it is, some people did complain that it was too slow. And I could maybe see that if I had read it in physical format, that it would have been a little bit slow for me. But I enjoyed it as an audiobook version. That's Penitence by Kristen Koval. Okay, and then the next book I'll talk about is The Lost Story by Meg Schaefer. And here is the description of that. Inspired by C.S. Lewis's The Chronicles of Narnia, this wild and wondrous novel is a fairy tale for grown-ups who still knock on the back of wardrobes just in case, from the author of The Wishing Game, which I have not read. As boys, best friends Jeremy Cox and Raph Howell vanished in a West Virginia state park, only to mysteriously reappear 6 months later with no explanation for where they'd gone or how they'd survived. 15 years after their miraculous homecoming, Jeremy is a famous missing persons investigator with an uncanny ability to find the lost, while Raph is a reclusive artist unable to stop creating otherworldly paintings and sculptures he shows to no one. He bears scars inside and out from his disappearance, but has no memory of what happened while they were gone. Jeremy alone knows the fantastical truth behind their time in the woods. While the rest of the world was searching for them, the two missing boys were in a magical realm filled with impossible beauty and terrible danger. However, Jeremy has kept Raph in the dark since their return for his own inscrutable reasons. But the time for burying secrets comes to an end when the vet tech Emily Wendell hires Jeremy to find her long-lost sister. The long-lost sister he and Raph knew while living in that hidden kingdom. Now the former Lost Boys must confront their shared past, no matter how traumatic the memories. Alongside the headstrong Emily, Raph and Jeremy return to the enchanted world they called home for 6 months, for only then can they get back everything and everyone they've lost. I feel like that description has too many spoilers. Like, far too many. But it's literally the description. So yeah, this book, okay. So a lot of folks really took issue with this book, it was not compared to the Chronicles of Narnia, inspired by, which again, I don't know why people take issue. Like, it doesn't claim to be the Chronicles of Narnia. It doesn't, just inspired by. But some people got a little twisted. I wonder if part of it is because the storyline does contain spoilers. Spoilers. The storyline does contain a gay romance. And so I wonder if, like, C.S. Lewis Christianity people maybe just got a little bit twisted up about that. I don't know. Again, not everybody got twisted up about it, obviously. But some people were like a little bit displeased. Whether or not that was just because they had deep nostalgia for Narnia and were, I don't know, whatever. I'm not them. But if you have intense feelings for Narnia, this isn't Narnia. Like, this is not even, it's inspired by. Don't go into it thinking you're going to have a similar experience. It is interesting though, like, this book is built for, is an adult book, like, but I do think it feels like a YA book. It's hard, isn't it hard to know, like, what differentiates those two? I guess it is primarily a marketing choice, but it does feel like an interesting one. It feels like it could have been a YA book, and I don't know why it wasn't billed as such. Obviously, I'm not a person who knows these things. But and again, it had those elements of, like, you have this sort of portal to another world scenario, but you never really feel like you get enough information about that side. It sort of just feels very pencil sketchy. There's also a narrator that sort of, like, pops in and out. Again, I think to give you sort of like a storybook feel. You get a narrator who pops in and out several times throughout the book and sort of gives you more of a telling versus showing. Like, she's a tool to sort of, like, condense some concepts and whatever. She's a tool. Or they're a tool. But yeah, it was fine. I'm not upset that I listened to it. Again, I listened to it on audiobook. It was very pleasant it was enjoyable enough while I was working. If you have limited time, I maybe would not recommend. This would not be like, oh, you must read this. Do you know what I mean? Like, it was fine. Better than any book I could write. And that is The Lost Story by Meg Schaeffer. It's Shaffer. And so then the last fiction book I will talk to you about is I Who Have Never Known Men by Jacqueline Hartman, translated from the French by Ross Schwartz. And this was first published in 1995. And the only reason I mentioned that is because it is a dystopian future novel. And so sometimes it's just helpful to know. Well, it's always helpful to know when a book was written, but especially when it is dealing with something that is not current and so doesn't have the context clues of when it's being written from, or when in time it's being written. So I guess I should read you the thing. Discover the haunting, heartbreaking post-apocalyptic tale of female friendship and intimacy set in a deserted world. Deep underground, 39 women are kept in isolation in a cage. Above ground, a world awaits. Has it been abandoned? Devastated by a virus? Watched over by guards, the women have no memory of how they got there, no notion of time, and only vague recollection of their lives before. But as the burn of electric light merges day into night and the numberless years pass, a young girl, the 40th prisoner, sits alone and outcast in the corner. Soon she will show herself to be the key to the others' escape and survival in the strange world that awaits them above the ground. The woman who will never know men. This one was a very interesting one. It's a fairly short read. Let's see. Okay, 201 pages, because again, I listened to the audiobook. And I mean, again, it's not maybe the easiest time to read dystopian feminist fantasy or dystopian futuristic novels, but sometimes it is comforting in an odd way. And so this is another one where there are not easy answers. There are not loose ends tied up. but I really enjoyed it. So the author was, she was born in 1929 and passed away in 2012. And she was Belgian. Her father was a Dutch-born Jew, so the family fled to Morocco when the Nazis invaded. They had been like high-end cloth and lace merchants. Isn't that interesting? To Northern Africa, so I don't know if they were like importers, exporters. So they went to Morocco when Hitler invaded and then moved back in 1940. No, I didn't write it down. Sorry. They moved back in like the 40s. And then she trained as a physician and then got tuberculosis. And then before she could become like, I guess, certified or what have you. And then she trained as a psychoanalyst. And then that was the career she had until she passed away in 2012. And she published several books. I don't know how many of them are available in English. So good words to describe I Who Have Never Known Men are desolate. Like, we are not in a richly described future world like Handmaid's Tale. It's dark. It's stark. Sorry, it sounded like I said dark. It's lonely. It's vast and empty. And then the main character is also all of those things in and of herself. And so it makes perfect sense this was written by a psychoanalyst. I didn't know that until after I had read it. But it is very much, I mean, many books are about a main character's internal journey. But that is the primary push of the whole thing. And she's, I don't know that she's likable, but she's also not, she's not dislikable. It's just I enjoyed it. It's surprising that it was written in the 90s, but it's also not. Like, it could have been written in the 1880s. Do you know what I mean? I mean, not really, because there's different things happening in the book. But you know what I mean? Like, the themes could have been written at any time. But yeah. Very interesting if you are into dystopian novels, if you're into sort of like yellow wallpapery kind of a vibe-ish. Gosh, it's been a really long time since I've read that, so maybe I'm misstating that sort of. But again, that desolate, that just you know what? But it's also not desperate at the same time. It's desperate for me as the reader, but I don't think it's necessarily desperate for the main character. I mean, it is, but not in the same way that it's desperate for me. I don't know. Intriguing, though. And that is I Who Have Never Known Men by Jacqueline Harpman. So then the first nonfiction book I'm going to talk about, I also listened to via audiobook, and that is The Salt Path by Raynor Winn, Raynorwinn. And here's the description. Just days after Raynor learns that Moth, her husband of 32 years, is terminally ill, their home and livelihood is taken away. With nothing left and little time, they make the brave and impulsive decision to walk the 630 miles of the sea-swept southwest coast path from Somerset to Dorset via Devon and Cornwall. They have almost no money for food or shelter and must carry only the essentials for survival on their backs as they live wild in the ancient, weathered landscapes of cliffs, sea, and sky. Yet through every step, every encounter, and every test along the way, their walk becomes a remarkable journey. The Salt Path is an honest and life-affirming true story of coming to terms with grief and the healing power of the natural world. Ultimately, it is a portrayal of home and how it can be lost, rebuilt, and rediscovered in the most unexpected ways. And she has since written, I think, 2 other similarly themed books, if I'm not mistaken. I enjoyed this one. I almost always I enjoyed it. Would it be the first book I would recommend if you asked me for books about people walking paths? No. But I love a good people walking on a path book, and this definitely fits the bill. And then they're in England on top of it. Thank you. I will sign up. So essentially, like, they are walking because they are homeless and they kind of don't know what to do. They lose their home, and so they have a specific amount of money that they will receive as like a benefit because of the husband's illness, and that they estimate that that's maybe enough to live off in terms of food if they do not have to pay for housing. And so, and it's even more interesting because his illness is physically debilitating. So it's it's sort of a, from my perspective, it's sort of a wild choice, but brings lots of healing to them. There's not as much, for a book that is folks walking along a path, there's not as much sort of like natural world content, not as much of that as I would expect from the description of the book. But I don't, whatever, that's just something to be aware of. It's definitely not like a naturalist's approach. The other thing that I sort of, which was a mild thing, but it's kind of about it, is that she sort of has an interesting way of distancing herself from other people who are experiencing homelessness. Sorry, the use of the word interesting is really one of my downfalls. But she often is like, separates herself out, not because necessarily that they are temporarily without housing, but more so that they are not, I think, like it's an addiction. Like, she looks at folks who are experiencing homelessness as a result of addiction as like a different class of people. Like, we're not one of those. Like, we look dirty, we're carrying our clothes, like our clothes are getting worn out, we're carrying everything we own on our backs, but we're not like those people who are experiencing homelessness, right? They do have some points of community with other people who are experiencing homelessness. That's definitely not like a larger theme. They don't seem to have any like great epiphanies about like shared humanity that I would kind of expect for folks I mean, that's not true. That I would hope for people going through this sort of experience. Not that they're cruel or anything, like, and they definitely are pointing out like social structural issues that have failed them and have failed other people. So it's not without that sort of interjection of that commentary, but it's certainly not like the primary gist. It's not the primary vibe. That said, I don't know, maybe 3.5 stars. Yeah. I definitely, this sort of a book is normally something I rate higher, but I think what I enjoy more about these sort of narratives is a lot of like the natural world. And not that that's not ever addressed, but it's not, there was not as much of it as I would have liked to have seen. It felt very like micro-focused on them moving through some sort of landscape, right? Like it wasn't like the lens was not broadened out as much as I would have liked it to have been. And maybe that's just like a scope issue or something like that. But I would have really loved it if the lens had been just brought a little bit wider than it was. So again, that's The Salt Path by Raynor Winn, W-I-N-N, sorry. I'm going to have to really talk to my husband about making food while I'm up here recording a podcast because that's very distracting. So then the last, oh my gosh, finally, the last book I'm going to talk about is The Mourner's Bestiary, which is a book by Erin Caffall, Caffall. And so here is the dusk jacket. Erin Caffall is the inheritor of a family legacy of 200 years of genetic kidney disease and the mother of a child who may inherit that legacy. A literary memoir on loss, chronic illness, and generational healing, Gafal's Mourner's Bestiary is also a meditation on grief and survival told through the stories of animals in two collapsing marine ecosystems, the Gulf of Maine and the Long Island Sound, and the lives of a family facing a life-threatening illness on their shores. And then, this is a new to me author. I do want to read. She has a relatively recent piece of fiction out, and it seems like there are so many themes of water in her writing. I think, anyway, from the description of the piece of fiction, I think it would be really interesting. This book, very much. It's so, what is it called? I heard somebody describe it as something. A blended memoir. So we got the personal line, but we also get this like sort of like history line, and then, but even greater so, this ecological line through the whole thing. And the way that they are all plied together, the way that they are interwoven, is really striking, especially I would say for the probably the first half. So it's broken into two parts. Book one is the Long Island Sound, so that's 1980. And then there's Sea of Stars, which is sort of like, so I guess that's 3 parts, but that's a very small part, which is 1994. And then the book two, which is the Gulf of Maine, which is 2014. Book one was by far my favorite because it felt like, and maybe it's because it's sort of like had been macerating longer, because she'd been with these memories and these stories and these things longer, and so she was better able, I think, or I really enjoyed more in this first book how she wove together those themes. Like, there were so many times that I would read a page and just stop and sort of like wonder at how she had tied, like, because I often say that I speak parenthetically, like I'll go down into nests and then come back up, but hers was much less linear in that way. It was very cyclical and spirally, and just again, very much like a water approach to that, where maybe the parentheticals is like a land approach to that, that nesting sort of concept. Yeah, there was so many, like there was, especially in that first half, I would just stop and be like, how did she manage to do this? Like, how did she, because, so she has polycystic kidney disease. And so one of the things, kidneys filter out the fluids in like they work with fluids in our body, just like really like basically, right? Because this is what's most important. And so you're dealing with things like dialysis, where fluids in your body are removed and purified and returned. And you often, when you have kidney issues, like you're retaining lots of fluids that then may have to be removed from you medically. So there's all of these issues within the internal self with this polycystic kidney disease, with water and fluid, right? And then disease, and like long-term disease. It's not an acute disease. It is a long-term fatal. Sorry, I could not come up with that word. There is an end. Like, there is not a cure, there is an end. But that end is very different for everybody else. It's sort of an unknown that's floating and that like is on the horizon, but nobody knows what theirs is going to look like, or like how fast it's coming. And then, or at least that's the impression I get from this book. So I don't know anything about polycystic kidney disease except for like what I have like taken from this book. So I could be very wrong. But you see the parallels, right, with like ecological systems, because you're talking about, like, she's very focused on, again, this first book is Long Island Sound. So we're very focused on these parallels between the health of these water systems and the dishealth of these water systems, and like how these things like flow between her and this water system and like these parallels. And then you also get like interesting ecological information woven into that narrative, not just like poetic back and forth between those two systems, but actual like scientific information. Just so later in the book, so in the second book, one of the things that she's talking, and there's so much about like parenting, but like, and being parented, and then parenting as a child. There, again, you get all of these like interplays and nesting things, and just like and then just like really beautiful moments that you just stop and you just sort of have to absorb. Like one of the things she talks about is she's talking about right whales, I think. And she's talking about one of the things that right whales have a very long gestational period, and then that mothers keep their young for like with them for a very long time. They're like matrilineal pods. And so one of the things she's talking about is, or one of the things she just sort of weaves into this chapter about her son, and he's navigating also health stuff, but like mental health stuff as well. One of the things the right whales do with their young, I could be wrong about it, but it's right whales, is that the mothers like whisper to their young as they're moving through dangerous waters. And it's a sound that other animals can't hear, from what I understand of the narrative, from the narrative. And so, like, she takes that image and again uses it both in her own parenting of this child and then how she was parented. And she's like, just touches back on it several times when you have like moved far away enough from that information about the right whale to sort of like let it diffuse in your mind, and then like it's very quickly zeroed back in on for just like a moment, and then you move away from it and you come back to it. So 5 stars. It is nonfiction, and it does have scientific content, but if that's something that normally is not your jam, I wouldn't let it deter you, because it is definitely science woven into life. It is not sterile science that is over there. Yeah. It is not, it's not a whimsical book. I don't know what is though, because there are all these moments of just like, of how amazing and intriguing and mysterious these sort of like natural phenomenon are. And that is whimsy within it. And it's probably also the thing that helps it, keeps it from just feeling like, I don't know about you. I can read books about hard things. But the thing that I have the most trouble reading about is environmental stuff. Like I almost can't do. I can read about poverty. I can read about folks experiencing homelessness. I can read about addiction. And I'm not saying that I'm like, oh, whatever. They affect me, and they affect me very differently or very deeply. But it is in a much, I don't know, environmental stuff puts me in a different place, and I get very strung out. Like I don't know. It's harder for me to read. But I didn't feel like that necessarily in this book, which is interesting because it's like terrible environmental stuff. And then also somebody with a terrible disease on top of it. So I don't know why. Maybe because it was tied to somebody, and so there was like a back and forth. I don't know. But that's the other thing. So if you're also like hesitant to read things about environmental crisis, it might be okay for you. I don't know. But I would definitely say paper or like physical, like book. That's still not covering it. I would say words that you're looking at with your eyes if you're able to. Because there are so many times where I really needed to stop and like control how long I was spending on a section, right? Like, I don't think I would want to consume this book at the same speed. Like every word in this book should not be consumed at the same speed for me. And so there were definitely places I needed to just sit with a couple of paragraphs and like spend longer with them. And then other places I was able to move through them more quickly. So yeah. The Mourner's Bestiary by Erin Cathal.